Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we are going to make this card. We're going to do some fun techniques, and actually the card we're going to make is going to turn out a little better than this one because I learned a few things along the way. So our next card will be much nicer. So what we're going to do is work with this really detailed stamp from our sponsor, Art Neko. You can find this along with all the other stamps I'm using today at artneko.com, and I'll put links in the video description so you can find these stamps and also share a coupon code to save 10% off your order. Just mention the Frugal Crafter and you will save 10% or get free shipping if your order's over 50, whichever discount is greater. So on the demo piece, I actually used markers to ink up my stamp, and I figured with a stamp this detailed, I really needed an ink pad for it because it was kind of hard to find my lines, and I thought that would be kind of a little bit more tricky. And what I'm doing is just laying my stamp, rubber the design side up, and just using my Archival ink pad. I like this because it's waterproof and I can watercolor over it. You might wonder if you can use StazOn. You can use StazOn, but the problem I find with StazOn ink is that it dries quicker before all the ink is transferred. It's actually drying on my stamp. Then I'm going to put my watercolor paper that I've already trimmed down to size right on top, and I'm going to press the back, rub the back with my hands, just being careful not to move it. I'm using the Canson XL watercolor paper, and I'm using this because it's pretty easy to find and pretty inexpensive. You can get a pad of 30 sheets, 9 by 12 for about $5 at Walmart or AC Moore or Jerry's Artorama. Very easy to find. There's also another paper that I like a little bit better. It's the Fabriano Studio, and you can get like a 75 sheet pad of 90-pound paper for about 20 bucks, that same size. So you do get a lot more paper. I like it a little better, but this is easier to find, so that's why I'm recommending this today. But whatever you have should work. Now see how I have a really nice crisp design? That got a little messed up, but that's alright because I'm going to be trimming off the border, as you can see here. But I guess there it is. I didn't press very hard on that corner, so that's why that didn't transfer. So you can kind of see the difference. See how the lines are so fine and detailed. And this is on a cold pressed paper. This isn't even on a smooth hot press paper. It's a fairly smooth cold pressed paper, and I still got a really good impression. Alright, so I'm going to set this aside to dry, and we're going to work on this technique called Faux Tile. And I'm working on a piece of glossy cardstock, which is a little different than photo paper. The big difference is that glossy cardstock dries slow and photo paper takes longer to dry. Now to get the Faux Tile look, what I'm going to use is a scoring tool. And if you don't have one, you can work on a mouse pad. Like I've got just a catalog and a piece of scrap paper underneath here. That provides some nice cushion, makes it easier to stamp. What I'm going to do here is just score every inch. And this is just a quarter of a sheet. And this is chrome coat, and you can get it at any printer, like Printer Supply. Go into your local print shop and just ask to buy a few sheets of this. It's about 25 cents a sheet, I think I paid. And it's really great stuff. Or you can get the Stampin Up glossy cardstock. That's good as well. Judykins makes a glossy cardstock. Many stamp companies do. I think Ranger does. Doesn't matter. But it is different than photo paper. You can try photo paper for this technique. It's not going to work that great with the brayering, I'll tell you that, because the ink just dries so quick. But some techniques you can totally use the photo paper for. Just remember, glossy cardstock dries slow, photo paper dries fast. And this scoring tool is the Score Buddy from the Score Pal company. And there you can see that I have scored a grid on here. I'll be trimming off the excess, but I'm just going to leave it on there for now because it's not hurting anything. Now, one of the mistakes, and I think it's very important to share mistakes when we make them because it helps us learn and it might help you avoid something when you are crafting. So I used a stamp on the background that was that had a border on it. So I've got these weird lines in there, and it kind of ruins my faux tile look. So I've decided to switch and use some Dragonfly stamps here. Now the ink we're going to use is a resist ink, and what it's going to do, basically it leaves kind of like a greasy residue on our glossy cardstock, and then the ink doesn't stick to it. So I'm just going to first ink up my largest Dragonfly, and really the middle doesn't matter, it's just what's going to be on the outside that's going to show. I'm going to stamp this a few times. Try not to wiggle your stamp when you stamp it, and I'm just kind of looking to make sure I've got ink on it before I commit it to paper. This isn't as slippery as like trying to stamp on glass or anything, but you do want to be aware of it. And I'm choosing a stamp like this because it's really bold and it has really definite lines. When I tried the other stamp, which is from the bookmark set, which I love, just that border was too much. It kept kind of competing with the lines of the grid that I had stamped. And embossing ink like VersaFine, VersaMagic, VersaFine, VersaMark, that's what it's called, that might work just fine for this. I've noticed some embossing ink pads do and some don't. You don't want it too juicy. That's something I have found. And then I'm going to do the little one here. I'm going to fill the little one in a little bit more frequently because I want to make sure I've got some pretty resist to show. And then if you hold it to the light, you can kind of see. Now I see I've got a fingerprint smudge there, so I don't know if the ink's going to stick to that section, so that might be an opportunity for embellishing. We love those embellishment opportunities, don't we? That is the one thing about glossy paper you have to be careful of. You don't want to get fingerprints or grease or anything on it because it will resist the ink. Alright, so I'm going to set this aside and let this dry. You can speed it up with a heat tool if you want to, but since we've got some coloring to do, I'm just going to set it aside. This is very much like embossing powder, embossing ink. You don't really need to clean up your stamps after you've used it. I just let it condition the stamps and go on my merry way. I'm going to set this aside for right now because I don't need that. And I'm going to zoom in for the coloring portion. Something I like to do when I'm coloring is I will take like a tile, a ceramic tile, and I will scribble out my colors on it, and that way I can use either a wet brush or a blending pen to kind of spread that color around. And that's really helpful with pens like these, Spectrum Aquas. I love these pens. They're great for inking up a stamp with, but I do notice like after a while the tips just aren't really sharp and easy to color with. They get kind of frayed. Let me see if I can find one that's a little bit more used. They have a nice fine tip end, which is great for detail, but you can kind of see how that tip is a little bit less pointy. So I just scribble out some color onto my my tile here, and I use that for painting. So it's a great way to get that watercolor look if you don't want the mess of watercolors, you just don't want to get any. So one way I could color is just to pick up like some green there, bring it over, and pick up a little bit of yellow. And you can do a lot of really fun things just with this technique. You can go over and add more color if you want to. And you can go in, like if your ink skipped somewhere, you could go in the fine tip of one of these markers to bring it back. So let's do a couple leaves in this fashion. This is such a busy design that that it might take you a while to figure out exactly what's what. You can blend your colors. This is great if you don't have a lot of markers because you can blend your colors on the tile. And this is called palette blending. Oops, I went out of the lines, but I'm going to put a background in, so I'm not too worried about it. Now there are a lot of different markers out, and one of the more popular ones right now are the Kuretake Zig markers. So, and to clean your brush, your clear blending brush, just scribble it on a piece of scrap paper until it comes clean. And that's all you need to do. So these are kind of interesting because they have really fine brush tips, like actual bristles in there. So I'm going to grab a couple of these and we will do a little coloring with that just so you can kind of see. We'll kind of get the same two colors I just used, I think. These should be fairly similar. Let's find another leaf. Let's try with this one over here. This is a little bit brighter, but not a big deal. So I can go in there with the green. And it is easy to control because I've got those fine brush tips, and I don't have to worry about the colors contaminating so much because you can just kind of wipe it right off the little bristles. But you can see I can kind of go in, I can drag that marker out, and I get a much more vibrant color because I'm not using a blending marker. I'm using the actual ink right from the marker. So there's another advantage. Neither of these brands of markers, though, are refillable according to manufacturer's instructions. In fact, I don't know of any water-based markers that are refillable, but when these run out, I am going to try to refill them with my liquid watercolors, just because you might as well before you throw them away, right? That's what I think, and I'll let you know. And I'm surprised, actually, that these have not run out because I let my kids use these, I let my husband use them. They like to do those adult coloring books, and I've had these since last summer, and they get used every day, and I can't believe they haven't run out yet. So, I mean, that's good at least. You're not gonna, you know, you're not gonna use them up right away anyway. I'll do a little shadow underneath where that's turned up. There we go. And I really prefer this brighter color, so I think I'm going to go right in here over this dry ink and do the same thing. There we go. Look at that. And that's another thing though, like if you're not sure and you're thinking, I want to invest in some markers, but I don't want to make a mistake because they're expensive, you can buy, I think the Spectrum Aqua markers, you can buy sets of 12. I don't think they come individually yet. I think that's something they're working on. I think they like to have their products individually, but I think they wait a while before they offer them. But you could get like a small set of 12 of the Spectrum Aquas. They're not as expensive as the Zigs, but you could buy a couple open stock Zigs, which are these, and see if you like them before you go and invest. The other good thing about these being available individually is that if you use up your yellow, you can just buy a yellow. You don't have to go buy a whole new set just for that one color. So so I think that's nice. Just make sure if you have been picking up other colors of ink that you scribble it out before you put it away. I think I might have to do some flowers before I go too much further on the leaves, because I don't think I'll be able to see where they are. So what I'm going to do, let me just blend out this leaf. We'll color a flower together, and then so you can kind of see the basic technique, and then I'll finish coloring it, and then we'll finish up the tile background. So for the flower, I'm going to grab a couple different shades of red and orange, because I like a nice bright. It looks like we've got a hibiscus and a couple poppies, which is kind of strange, but I'm going to go with it. It's pretty. And I like to start with my darker color first. I know not everybody does, but I do. I'm going with my darker color in there. And I'm on watercolor paper, remember, so it's blending a little easier than it would on cardstock. And I'm going in with my orange right over that red and just pulling it up a little bit more, a little bit under the upturned leaf. I'm going to go in with my lighter yellow orange and just kind of touch right at the edge of where I've already colored and drag that color up. I can work over an area and blend it if I need to. There, get a nice blend there. And then I'll just do this little turn right there by itself. Now I'm going to go over to these petals. I'm going to again go into my red right at the bottom. Not too much of that. That's really strong. And then in with my orange. So these are a wonderful product. They're expensive though. So the nice thing, like where I showed you with the tile, you can use a damp brush or a blending brush like the Tombow blender or the Stampin' Up blender, and you can get a very similar look with whatever you have. Even if it's Crayolas, you can do great things with Crayola markers. I don't want to make you feel like you have to go out and buy all the new products, but if you were trying to decide between a couple of them, hopefully this would help you. Now for like inking up a stamp though, the Spectrum Aquas are going to be much better for that. So will your Tombows or your Mementos. But for doing watercolor techniques, the Zigs are really, really easy to use, and you can get right in there with that tiny detail. So, you know, it just depends on the type of art you like to do and how you like to create. There's no, you know, better or worse. You know, you got to consider your budget and consider what it is you actually want to do. Now in the middles, I think I'm going to use like a shade of brown. Purple would be pretty, but I think the purple is not going to really go with my color scheme here, so I think I'll just go in with a brown for now, because I know I'm going to use brown on some of the stalks, some of the stems. Yeah, that's not quite dark enough. I'm going to go in with something a little bit darker, but I'm going to have that handy. We'll try this brown. Oh yeah, that's much better. It's a little darker. It's kind of like a burnt sienna color. And there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and color the other flowers and leaves, and we'll be back just to do a little bit in the background. I did decide to go in with that yellow that I was using on the leaves and bring a even brighter highlight onto these other flowers. So these are actually done with 4 colors. I just use the same colors I did on that demonstration, but added yellow into the mix, just that same bright yellow that I did on the leaves. I think it just gives a little bit more blending and pretty look to these flowers. Completely up to you what you want to do. I'm going in with this brown to add some color to the branches. I'm not coloring it all though, I just kind of want to help map exactly where everything is, because there's kind of a tangle of leaves and branches, and it was a little bit difficult in such a complex design that's this small to figure out where everything goes. So I figured if I got this kind of anchoring branch in, then that would help me. And I'm just blending it out with a lighter color so I have some dimension in the branches. You could also do a fine tip pen, color it all the same color if you wanted to. There's really no right or wrong way. I just kind of like to have that tonal, a little bit of different colors between parts of an item. I just think it looks pretty to have a couple different shades in there versus just one shade. And then I can go in with my green, and things that look more like vines, those I will do with my green, and I'll just keep that one color because it is a little bit smaller and I really can't get in and blend more and something that small. So just keep on kind of going through and figuring out what you have for leaves, what you have for branches, what are buds, and kind of by process of elimination you'll get them all colored. And this is just kind of how you come to grips with a really detailed stamp design. I find that I can go and put in a bunch of darks all at once because I'm working on watercolor paper and the ink will stay wet long enough. If you're working on cardstock though, you're going to want to do one little section at a time because it will dry, it'll sink into the paper. Watercolor paper has a sizing on it that keeps the ink at the top of the paper, so it allows you to do that. But cardstock, cardstock's designed to have things dry quicker, just like photo paper is designed for things to dry quicker. You just got to work with the properties of your paper. You would totally do this on cardstock, you just have to do like one leaf at a time. I'm working a little bit quicker than you need to. I just want to be able to show you as much as I can in a limited amount of time, so you can, go to your own table and do some stamping. Now I want to do the background, and I have a large area and I know I'm going to need to blend it out, so I think I'm going to actually blend the background with water. I think I'm going to go back to my tile here and scribble out some of this pretty Kingfisher blue. These have a lot of ink in them. I love using them for backgrounds, and I think I might actually even have a little bit right there, starting off the edge where I know I'm going to crop it, and see if I can get that to blend out well with a wet brush. I just have a little paintbrush here, and I am going to spray a little puddle of water off camera that I can dip into on my craft mat. Okay. I probably should have had my water ready to go before I began, but as you can see, it's spreading that ink around just fine. I'm just using a little brush. It's called the cat's tongue because it's flat, but it also comes to a point. It's kind of shaped like a tongue, and it works great for being able to do detail as well as kind of do a flatter, broader wash of color. I'm going to go right over that because I don't really want to highlight that. I find the ink to be very similar between the Spectrum Aqua markers and the Kuretake Real Brush pens, that that there's just, these are for you differences, and depending on how you like to create, one's going to be more suitable. Like this has a great journaling nib, so if you like to scrapbook, that would probably be a little bit more useful. If you like to stamp and scrapbook, that's great because you can, and I don't mind how that bled out like there. I think that's kind of fun. Looks very watercolory. So if you like to stamp and scrapbook, you can use that like an ink pad, you can use it like a journaling pen, so you have both of those options. It just depends on how you like to work. But if you'd rather stamp an item like line artwork, stamp something in black and then color it, then you probably would be more happy with this, especially if you're not doing any journaling. So just weigh the pros and cons if you're looking for markers and figure out what your needs are. Don't worry about what your friend prefers, don't worry about what I prefer. Buy what's best for you. And before you buy anything, see if what you already have will work. because, you know, if you have Tombow markers, they're just as good. If you have the Tim Holtz Distress markers, if you have the Stampin' Up markers, they're really good. Mementos are really good. They're not as good for watercoloring, but they're a good marker. They're great for stamping and journaling. You know, use what you have. All right, so I'm gonna let that panel dry. I like the way that turned out. Now I'll show you the other one so that you can compare. This one I inked my Stamp Up with my Spectrum Aqua, the fat markers here, and then stamped it and then colored it with the clean colors to get my detail. But it was kind of hard because I lost a lot of detail when I stamped with the color, so it was kind of tricky. And this one, of course, is just done with the stamped with waterproof ink and then colored with both of the different types of markers. All right, so we're going to get back to our faux tile. So this is nice and dry now. I'm going to set that out of the way, set my markers out of the way. And you're going to need a piece of scrap paper, and you're going to need a brayer. And if you've never used a brayer before, it looks like this, and mine has blue ink on it from the other one I just did, so there's no point in washing it if you're just going to go back in with the same color. I generally have one brayer for color, for like any color ink except for black, because the colored ink usually washes off, and then I have my other brayer for black ink. What you want to do is look for even coverage. So I pick it up and I roll it on. Pick it up, roll it, pick it, roll it, pick it, roll it. Okay? So you cover the entire roller. Then when I go to brayer it on, I want to roll it across, pick it up, roll it across, pick it up, roll it across, pick it up, then re-ink it. Okay, I don't go back and forth because if I go back and forth, I might just be picking up the ink I've already put, and it would, if there was like a resist on there or something, it would just be picking up the same ink over and over again. So I try to go for a fairly even coverage, but it's going to even out, and you can start to see our design show up. If you don't have a brayer, you could use sponges, but look how awesome those white lines look. Alright, so just kind of let that be for a few seconds. I'm going to grab a tissue so I can wipe off the extra ink. Now the only thing you want to be careful of with the tissue, and I did it a little bit in the other one by mistake, is that you want to be careful not to just push the ink into the grout lines that you made. So I'm going to try to kind of wrap it around like that so I don't. And I'll start in the middle to make sure the ink is dry. You can kind of see the design start to emerge. And you can move to a fresh part of your napkin so that hopefully you won't press ink into the areas. Now remember where I say I had a fingerprint? You can see those two areas where I thought I saw a fingerprint, it is resisting the ink. So I might even have had that ink on my finger, who knows? And you could use like any size, you could use tiny stamps to make some designs. You could stamp a different thing in each section. That would look really cute. You could just stamp colored images and then brayer on a background color, or just sponge on a color, or leave it plain. Completely up to you. Okay. Now I'm going to trim off the little extra piece there for right now. I might trim it a little bit. I'll probably end up trimming it a little bit smaller, but I just want to trim it down. Let's see. I just ended up trimming it down a little bit on the other one. Okay, I think I want to actually trim that little white edge off too. Alright, so I'm going to go wash my hands and then we are going to finish up our card. Alright, I'm going to trim out my design here. I'm trimming off the border, and I'm going to use a corner rounder, so I'm not concerned with the with those little flourishes in the corner, because they're going to get trimmed off. This is a nice heavy duty punch. I like because it has 3 options in it, which is kind of fun. Okay, and then here's a little tip. I bought a bunch of these inexpensive card bases at Michael's. They came in like an 80 pack, and I I found, because I'm working upstairs in my office and I don't always want to run downstairs and get a whole full sheet of paper, I actually will cut up the card bases and use them for layering weight layers, and it works really, really well. So I'm just going to set that on there and see how much of a border I'm going to want of my orange. All right, that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to adhere these two together and then adhere it to my orange and then trim it. It's a little bit easier to do it that way. All right. I hope you try the faux tile background. It's really fun. You don't have to use glossy paper. You can just use stamping and sponges. It's so pretty. All right, so I'm just gonna put that there and then trim it out. This is not my favorite trimmer, but it's more convenient than my big trimmer. I have a little Creative Memories one downstairs I really like. But that one always lives downstairs on my table. The nice thing about this though is if I put the edge of my paper up with this guide bar, I get like a perfect 1/8 of an inch border, which is really handy. And let's see, how do I want this to go? Now, because of the calligraphy on here, I'm thinking that it should be an upright card like this. But I actually prefer it. Yeah, I actually would prefer it kind of like that. But I'm going to kind of go with the way the calligraphy goes, which would make a top, like standing kind of portrait style card like that. I'm going to go ahead and put my adhesive down. And there you go. So you learn a couple techniques. You could, you know, it looks like a pretty simple card, but you got to try a couple different techniques. If you're not into doing the tile thing, you could always leave that panel plain. I got this on crooked. There's another tip. If you pick up your layers quick enough, and you can reposition them before the adhesive becomes permanent, which is something I've learned to be very helpful. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please check out our sponsor, artneco.com. You can find them online and mention the Frugal Crafter if you order to save 10% or get free shipping on your order. I'll put links to the markers I used too in case you want to check them out. These are more expensive than these. They're both good, just depends on what sort of techniques you want to do, but look in your own stash first, see if you have something that will work just as well. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy crafting!